Welcome to Master of Science with host Professor James McCanney. The good professor's career spans 50 years as a university teacher, scientist, and engineer. Each week, he will explore the rapidly changing world of science as many long-held theories are crumbling under the weight of new data. He will cover the fields of geology, archaeology, meteorology, oceanography, space science, astronomy, cosmology, biological evolution, virology, energy, mathematics, and more. So please welcome the host of Master of Science, James McCanney.
Good evening, everybody. Episode number 75 in the ongoing series. Tonight, a few changes, very interesting changes from topics I've been talking about in the last number of weeks. Now, right now, today, we are in the middle of what should be the Jupiter winds, or maybe the tailing end of the Jupiter winds, but oddly enough, for the first time in decades. Now, these happen about every 13 months as Earth comes around in its orbit and has an electrical alignment with Jupiter. Jupiter carries the largest cross-solar system electrical discharge from the sun. And that's going on all the time, and it has a lot to do with the 11-year solar cycle. That's the same orbital period as Jupiter around the sun, which connects into the larger galactic interchange that the sun is having. Remember that from my work, the fusion of the sun and of Jupiter, the fusion is up in the atmosphere. It's not in the core. And so that means that the sun depends on a constant influx of hydrogen on an ongoing basis, on a daily basis. So that means that the sun is acting as a comet in the galactic solar or fusion-based proton wind. And the Russians had this figured out empirically when I met them in the mid-90s. The Alexei Dmitriev already had a paper talking about the influence of extragalactic hydrogen on the sun, but they didn't know how it worked or what caused it or how it got into the sun. And then that's why they loved my work, because it explained all this: the tornadoes on the sun, the Tunguska event, the cyclonic storms, on and on and on. Okay, but right now, for decades, I've been tracking, in every 13 months on my radio show, which goes back 25 years, I've been talking about the Jupiter winds. And this year, they didn't happen. And so it's very interesting. And that means that Jupiter is already connecting electrically to 3I Atlas. It's diverting Jupiter's electrical discharge considerably. And so we're going to connect into that literally on January 22nd. That's the best estimate I have based on NASA's old data. So that probably will change, but NASA is guarding data like their lives depend on it. Yeah, and so there's an interesting thing that happened. A guy named John Greenwald put in a Freedom of Information Act request with the CIA, not NASA, CIA, knowing well that the CIA controls NASA, on 3I Atlas. And the data on 3I Atlas is at a security level that is above NASA. It is above any ability of scientists in NASA to get at it. And so they have these pitiful little smudged pictures, and all they're saying in their public releases, that is NASA is saying, all they are saying is that they have a lot of photos, and it's going to take a long time before they release them, be through peer-reviewed publications. We all know what that means. That means obfuscation, peer review, and so anyway, it's getting to be a joke. However, 3i Atlas, and I'm going to preface this whole thing so I don't forget to mention it, but 3i Atlas is going to have a severe course correction when it comes to Jupiter. And I'm trying to work on that. I have not had time this past week to finalize the orbital possibilities, but it's going to have a severe gravitational effect and electromagnetic effect when it's already diverting Jupiter's electric field. Now, I want to give a similar example talking about hurricanes. Hurricanes, this happened, my work on hurricanes shows that they're not caused by warm water, that they're caused by an electrical discharge between the surface ions above the ocean and the ionosphere. And so one time there were two hurricanes. They were moving out towards Hawaii, and they joined, and one just sucked the other one into it. And it's kind of like Jupiter's Great Red Spot. It's another phenomena, a cyclonic storm phenomena, which is a giant hurricane. Then there was another hurricane which was supposedly going to hit the Big Island, a direct path, the Big Island of Hawaii. And all of a sudden, and they were preparing, it was, there was a major Category 4 or 5 hurricane building up steam. And the Hawaiian legends are that hurricanes have never hit the island of Hawaii, although they really slammed into all the other islands. And so anyway, what's going on is there's an electrical connection between Mauna Loa, the active volcano on Hawaii, and the ionosphere. And so what happens is as these hurricanes came in, and this one was a perfect example, all of a sudden that electrical connection that's driving the hurricane jumped and connected with the Mauna Loa electrical connection, and the hurricane dissipated overnight, just went whoosh, it was gone. Okay, so at any rate, back to the Jupiter winds. This is what we're seeing with Jupiter. We're seeing Jupiter's cross-solar system electric field connecting in through 3i Atlas. So they're already connecting. And so this is going to be a real light show with Jupiter. And it's in the night sky. I wouldn't be surprised if you could see it with very minor telescopes once the fireworks begins. And I predicted also that 3i Atlas would become a sulfur dioxide comet, changing from water. So you see all of the data that NASA has to hide. That, they have all these pictures and they have to go through peer review. That's BS. NASA is just covering its tracks. And really, at this point, it's very clear that NASA itself, like the Goddard boys, the Tier 2 Goddard boys that fly around the world on what I call scientific vacations, they're locked out too. They don't have data. They're not going to see the real stuff. They're going to get a few fuzzy smudge photos and sit around in their office and collect their paycheck and hope they can get to retirement so they can be golfing in Arizona. And that's the best thing that can happen to them unless they win the lottery. The best thing that can happen to them is they just get to retirement, get a paycheck for life, and get out of there. Isn't that a pathetic state? That's the pathetic state of science today. Okay, so back to the Jupiter winds, which were centered around January 9th. That was where Earth inferior conjunction to Jupiter occurred. And so that's just a couple days ago. So we should still be in the middle of the Jupiter winds. And these, of course, are straight line winds that blow for days and days and days as we connect into the Jupiter, as Earth's electric field connects into that of Jupiter's, and it drives our wind systems. We typically don't get tornadoes or hurricanes. It's just straight line winds for a number of days, but they didn't happen. Okay, so a little bit more on that. Okay, a topic that's very important: copyright, fair use statement, trademarks, patents, and other cautionary notes. Now, this is for you little copycat specialists out there, and you know who you are. They listen every week. In fact, it's rather comical. One of the copycat out there is starting to claim fair use of my material. And let me just start out by explaining that my material is extremely unique. Extremely unique. And this comes from many decades, starting in 1979. So this is before, in some cases, before these people's parents were even born, let alone the YouTubers, etc., that are copying my material today. And so let me go into detail here. The idea of fair use is a very strange thing because people think, oh, you can just take something from somebody else and put it up there and call it fair use. And then without referencing where the fair use came from even. And so that's kind of like a slip slide as people are trying to get away with basically stealing material, claiming it as their own, and making money. And now these people have also stated publicly that they are making money both from YouTube financing and from the other aspects of making money online, all of which, if you're familiar with monetization, you already know what all of those are. So these people are making money, squandering my materials, squatting, let me say, on my material. And like I say, my material is extremely unique. Out of all of the decades that NASA has been around, professional scientists, astrophysicists, independent scientists, government agencies, etc., nobody, and none of these have developed anything similar or close to what I have. And this has happened in the past, it's going to happen in the future, and these people are being egged on. You have to understand that most YouTubers that have success have handlers. And let me just put it like this, it's very clear. They're being pushed and to try and edge in as much as possible. And the whole idea is to get people looking at the garbage interpretation and the squatting on my material and to keep people away from seeing my material. On this, on the pages where I release my own web pages, radio show, television shows, interviews where I'm on, etc. So let me go through my own page, and first of all, I'll talk about fair use, because that's the slip slide that people are trying to use to squander, like I say, squat on my material and use it with impunity, they think. So let me just talk about fair use. Fair use is a thing that is just a way of kind of like bypassing the copyright law. And here's what my statement on, now an individual like myself can claim very strict fair use rules. It's not just an open book. You can use something, use it, and not give credit. First of all, you have to give credit from where you're using the fair use. So if I posted a photograph, for example, right here is a photograph from the Ian Griffin from his observatory, and it's listed right there. I have his name, the observatory, when the photo was taken, and the fair use. Okay, that is allowed, but I reference who it's from. What these clowns are doing is taking my material and not referencing where this is coming from. And all of a sudden, everybody's a plasma expert. If you can say the word plasma, you're in with the in crowd. And so, okay, first of all of my work is copyrighted. The show, the poster behind me, all the work I've done, my books, my lectures, CDs, DVDs, etc. And like I say, this is all before these people were even born. So to somehow claim fair use and use my material is completely copyrighted. And so any use of any of it, phrases, terminology, etc., is strictly prohibited. Strictly prohibited. Without written permission, guarantee you they don't have written permission and never have requested it. And what they try and do is pretend like they're authorities and pretend like, oh, they just discovered this. Isn't that amazing? And then what they do too is they put it, one of the most common things is then like they'll use the dirty snowball comet model and talk about plasma effects of the dirty snowball comet model or of planetary alignments or something else. Things that are clearly my work. Dealing with weather, solar weather, my book on the physics of sun-earth weather, Principia Meteorologia, the physics of sun-earth weather. Very clear and very original work. Okay, so all of this is copyrighted. All of it is copyrighted. And I want to just, because I know these people are listening, I want you to know that I have groups of people now that are going out and going through all of your videos to get copyright infringement and fair use infringement. And you're making money off of me, my ideas, my work, and it's going to stop. Okay. So here's a fair use statement that's on my webpage, the jmcannyscience.com webpage. Those wishing to claim fair use are limited to a single use of not more than 15 seconds audio or video clip, total time from a single clip only, from one of the radio or television shows, or less than 500 letters, including spaces, symbols, and special characters, from any text based on information including published books, CDs, DVDs, or other medium, and must be accompanied by the hyperlink, which is referencing www.jmcannyscience.com. If an image is included, that image requires written approval in all cases to prevent posting a negative bias image or other issues involving with posting an image. In addition to these fair use limits, all use by individuals, companies, government institutions, or for commercial use, that means people making money, for commercial use, require a signed written agreement with J. McCanney Science, LLC. Yes, LLC, and it's trademarked. Information cannot be paraphrased. You understand? They kind of do the slip slide. They're saying what I'm saying, but then paraphrasing. Completely against the fair use rules. Okay. Information cannot be paraphrased. Let me repeat that. The use of names and related materials cannot be used to draw attention and or drive traffic to any other website, social media site, or other platform or media. Such use is strictly prohibited. Additionally, see trademark notice below. Because of the complex and extensive amount of material presented in my varying media, the use of short clips or other materials taken out of context for commentary is strictly prohibited and does not fall under fair use. Okay? This is a very tight proclamation of fair use on my webpage, and it's been there for decades. Okay. The materials have been created. The materials have been created are for the benefit of the reading, listening public, as well as professionals seeking information produced by Professor McCanney. This material is not for people, entities attempting to copy pieces and analyze it for commentary. Such use is strictly prohibited and does not fall under the fair use clause of the copyright law. See copyright notice above for further restrictions. For any use by any entity, private, corporate, or government agency, usage and charges must be negotiated and paid for any usage over the fair use limits. News media and requests for related materials are approved on a case-by-case basis. Use the contact email which is info@jmcannyscience.com. Note that lack of response means that you do not have permission to use these materials. So people saying, oh, I tried to email them and I didn't hear back. That clause is very specifically addressed here, because that's something that people will try and do to pretend like they tried to contact me but just didn't hear back. It says, note that lack of response means that you do not have permission to use materials. In other words, it has to be negotiated, written, and signed, and believe me, these clowns ain't going to get it. Okay, so now, additionally, under the copyright, this is on my webpage, by the way. This is under the About main topic heading on the jmcannyscience.com webpage. I want to read further. This is in regard to charges. Okay, and once again it repeats, lack of response to requests for use or any other information does not constitute permission to use any materials. Lack of response means that you specifically do not have permission to use any materials. Any person or entity that violates these terms of use agrees to pay $50,000 US dollars or $2,500,000 US dollars if by an employee or associate of any government agency or company receiving government funding, which is some of these people, they're getting money under the table, and attorney's fees plus additional damages imposed in the court. See fair use statement below. Note that although scientific ideas of themselves cannot be copyrighted, the description of scientific ideas are copyrighted. Let me read that again. Note that although scientific ideas of themselves cannot be copyrighted, the descriptions of scientific ideas are copyrighted. The materials found here constitute descriptions of scientific ideas and are copyrighted, including the prevention of use of the same using alternative language. If you wish to notify people of materials, please list the URL to the jmcannyscience.com webpage. Okay, so it goes on. Due to the great interest in materials produced by myself and a high level of borrowing and outright plagiarism this material is received from private and government entities, including websites, YouTube channels, or other social media channels attempting to use, and in many cases to distort the information. This warning notice is being posted. The copyright notice is noted above, and the related fair use statement listed below. This is clearly posted on the jmcannyscience.com webpage, and an ignorance defense of these copyright fair use and related statements is null and void. By willfully ignoring the copyright fair use and other notices, you agree to the above noted fees to be charged to the person, agency, entity making the posting and the owner of the server, ISP, and any other web pages, other media posting this material, even if these materials are later removed. In other words, if you posted it, it's there, and you are subject to these documented charges. Okay, so that's it. And I had to put this in there because the level of growing infringement on my material on some of these web pages is, well, it has to be dealt with. That's all I can tell you. So, and you notice that the government agencies are very conscious of this. The government agencies are very conscious of this. But then what they do is they, under the table, support some of these individual who are out there trying to gain their viewership and making money and posting my material. And what they're trying to do also in some of these cases, I could list them off and you would know immediately who these people are. They're trying to push me into legal actions. And that's also why the fair use and copyright statements are listed as they are. These are chargeable, like you buying an ice cream cone. Okay, if you buy an ice cream cone, you go up to the store and say, I want an ice cream cone. Okay, the guy says, okay, now you owe me $2 for the ice cream cone. You made a purchase. You owe the guy $2. By infringing on my material, you made a purchase, and you're going to pay for it. It's not a lawsuit. We're going to send you a bill, and you're going to pay it. Okay, so onwards and upwards. I want to spend some time talking about this Jupiter winds thing, because this is very, very interesting. We have a comet, and now let me review 3i Atlas. Just briefly, the thing they're concentrating on now, specifically Avi Loeb, who's claiming this is alien technology and still running with that, in spite of the fact that NASA is coming out and saying they did a test. They ran a gigahertz spectrum test on radio signaling, and they say they find no signaling of any kind that's relative to advanced technology, kind of trying to shut down Avi Loeb. But all it does is fuel him more, because he points out the things that NASA ignores, like the sunward spike, the persistent sunward spike from Comet 3i Atlas. And so, anyway, the issue here is that we don't have the Jupiter winds. We don't have the Jupiter winds this year, and so that means that Jupiter's already connecting to this comet electrically. And the pictures that have come out from various sources indicate multiple jets coming off of and that's typical. In fact, this picture here, right here, let me see, this one here, is a very good example. I hope you can see that clearly. This is Comet Hale-Bopp, and was taken with a Swan filter, which is triply ionized oxygen and ionized hydrogen. In other words, a water molecule in which there are many electrons stripped off. And so this sees water. What we're seeing here is water, highly ionized water streaming in. And where does that come from? It comes from hydrogen and oxygen combining as they come into the comet nucleus. And I want to just dispel a myth that people think, oh, the space is empty. It's a vacuum. There's nothing there except a couple of asteroids in the asteroid belt, and that's not true. There's a lot of material on the atomic basis, or very small molecular basis, in outer space. So you have all the way up to iron, but the heavy things are closer to the sun. And as the solar wind blows out and it sweeps this stuff out, it still leaves a lot of material that's coming in, because remember, the sun is a comet. It's discharging the capacitor of the wider scale galaxy that we live in, because it has a fusion-based wind also. And so all of this material is being drawn into the sun, primarily hydrogen. And like I say, the Russians had that already well understood when they met me in the mid-90s. And they loved my material because I explained where this material was coming from and why the sun was able to draw in this material into the sun. And I also explained that the solar fusion is in the atmosphere, not in the core of the sun, which give rise to the solar wind, and it explains how the solar wind works, all of this. Okay, so at any rate, there's all this material in the solar system. And when the comet comes in, it discharges the solar capacitor. You have the buildup of negative charge around the comet nucleus. And this diagram right here is let me see, move my head out of the way so you can see this. Like I say, that diagram was drawn in 1986 for a presentation at American Geophysical Union meeting. And it's drawing material in towards the comet nucleus. And so the larger nuclei can build up and become planets. That's what's going on. The capture, my first book was dealing with the comet capture processes in the formation of solar system. That's the main about 350-page book that I wrote when I was at Cornell, 1979, and that is the basis then of the three-part comet paper that was later published in like 1981 to 83 in a 3 series of publications. But at any rate, the water is coming in, it's highly ionized, and what happens is there's a thing called the pinch effect, that as charged particles are moving, they create a self-induced magnetic field and it pulls the current together, which is, by the way, instrumental in the non-inertial propulsion systems, the plasma propulsion systems that I invented and gave many talks on. Some of those are publicly available. But at any rate, the Comet 3I Atlas is exhibiting the same behavior with the multiple tails. And the ancients talked about Venus, the comet, having multiple tails. Multiple tails being, they said, up to 14 tails. If you look at the Hale-Bopp picture here, right here, it has, you can count 17 tails. And so that's a plasma discharge comet. That's exactly what's going on. So interestingly enough, 3I Atlas is exhibiting that also, and it's connecting electrically already to Jupiter. And the fact that we do not have the Jupiter winds, which should be blowing like crazy out there right now, and it's not. So that tells me that the Jupiter is already connecting into the comet. And the real date of the inferior conjunction of Earth with Comet 3I Atlas is January 22nd. Now, I've been talking about this for a very long time. Everybody was up in the air, and December 19th, and it was the closest approach, and the sky was going to fall. No, it was a nothing burger. Never was supposed to be anything. It was just a date when physically a physical close approach, but it was like across on the other side of the solar system, the comet was moving actually away from us. It was a quirk of how Earth was coming around in its orbit, and there was no alignment, there was no electrical alignment, nothing to write home about. But you have these clowns on the internet making us special. It's going to be a live special. Oh my goodness, what a bunch of idiots. That's the problem, is you people are being influenced by people who have no clue what they're talking about, just rambling on, getting those clicks, getting YouTube to send them money, and keeping up to absolute ridiculous nonsense, and they have no idea what they're talking about. But the reality is that since Jupiter is already connecting to the comet, the January 22nd connection, in which I will also make a caveat here, the January 22nd may be different because, number one, the comet has slowed down, and then it has had an acceleration as it was going out due to the tail drag. And that's something, of course, is very specific to my work, how the non-gravitational forces are created because of the tail drag of the comet. Okay, so at any rate, I'll just say this, probably around the 19th of January they could start, and it might even be earlier than that, we don't know, because NASA has not published the updated ephemeris orbital elements of this comet. We don't know. NASA has the data, and people like myself, we don't have telescopes and instrumentation and computer systems that can actually determine the orbit of this thing. So, and by the way, it's very interesting. A comet like this should have tons and tons of amateur photos online. Nothing. How do they control this? Like I was saying, the Greenwald Freedom of Information Act request to the CIA, not NASA, to the CIA, came back and basically said they can't talk about it. It's at a level of security that's above what the CIA can let out. So they're very much onto this comet. And just imagine all of the footage they have of this interacting electrically with the planet Mars when it went by. Remember, NASA shut down completely, and even after that they said, oh, it's due to the government shutdown. And then afterwards they never released any photos, any data. And they had Webb telescope in the infrared, they had the Hubble invisible, they had the James Webb invisible, they had invisible light, they had radio telescopes, they had x-rays, and they have all these, ultraviolet, all this data, and they come on with 4 old pictures of looked like a smudge on a piece of paper, and claiming that, oh, it's going to take months to analyze it in peer review. What a bunch of garbage. Okay, so at any rate, the real story is that Jupiter is already connected to the comet. The interaction of Earth with, the interaction of the comet with Jupiter is going to be set out in March, and that could be anything from this item, 3I Atlas, becoming a new moon of Jupiter. Will it interact with the current moons of Jupiter and disrupt them? There will very, very clearly be serious electrical connections between the comet and Jupiter. It's already beginning, and it's like 2 months out. And so the January 22nd, I'm expecting the Jupiter winds plus the 3I Atlas winds, which I thought were separate events, are now combining. And so we might have some really serious winds here coming up in, like around the 19th, 20th, 21st, 22nd of January, somewhere in there. And then that could continue. That could continue for quite a bit. Anyway, we'll just see. I mean, it's hard to predict. It's hard to predict. We don't have data. We've never seen a comet of this magnitude before. And something I was started to say before is that Comet 3I Atlas is discharging the solar capacitor much more than an average comet, because it's moving so fast. And there again, let me use the backyard bug killer discharge as an example. Imagine that a bug is flying into the backyard bug killer. Remember, it's 2 plates. One is ground, that's the outside plate, so you don't kill yourself. And the inner plate, which is not really a plate, it's a screen. The outer screen and the inner screen, there's a very high voltage. And so when the bug flies in, attracted to the light, the fluorescent lights that's in the middle, the bug discharges the local capacitor, and it always discharges right where the bug is. That's the basis, that's the plasma basis. And I've used that example since my very inception, kind of like a parable, kind of like the prophets used to use parables to teach concepts to people. And they go, oh, okay, and then they understand it. And so I've used the backyard bug killer as an example on teaching. That'd be a good example of something that people might try and lift out of my material and infringe on basically concepts and material that I've developed to teach my audience. Okay, so at any rate, if the bug flies faster, the discharge will be greater. And so that's what's going on with 3I Atlas. It's coming in so fast, it's cutting through the gradient of the electric field lines so fast that it's causing a much bigger discharge for its size than would happen if it were a much smaller comet or much slower comet. And the speed is the ultimate factor here. And so they're talking about this thing being a mile wide or a kilometer wide or something. That's all baloney. Don't believe a word they say about comet size. Not at all. Okay, so at any rate, around the 22nd, somewhere a few days before, a few days after, it could be a number of days before because, or a number of days after actually, because if the comet has slowed down considerably, which it has, then the arrival date of that intersection with Earth's orbit could be later. But Earth is moving in its orbit too, so it's a complicated physics problem. Okay, So I will keep you posted on this. That'll be in the next, what's today, the 13th? So that's in like within another week. We'll be potentially start to see these winds, combined Jupiter winds and 3i Atlas winds, wind like wind like the moving air wind. Okay, I think that covers it. But very interesting times, and then just let me repeat: 3i Atlas will become a sulfur dioxide comet, or it'll have a significant amount of sulfur dioxide in the tail material as it reaches out and comes close to Jupiter. And one thing that I will be doing here also is analyzing its orbit based on available information of the current orbit to see what's going to happen when it comes near Jupiter, because it's going to have a significant gravitational encounter and significant electromagnetic encounter with Jupiter and the moons of Jupiter, etc. Okay, I'm going to continue the discussion. I don't have enough time. I had another topic I was going to go into this week, but there's just not enough time left. It's an extensive topic. It comes from one of my books, which you should read, by the way. It's called The Real History of Man and Earth, Myths, Magic, and Mayhem. And there's some very important points from that book. And so I'll be doing some reading and some teaching from that next week, hopefully. But I wanted to continue the topic about cratering. Now, let's examine a crater. Here you got the surface of the moon or Earth or something like that. And of course, on a grand scale, it's round. But on the local scale, it's pretty much flat. So an asteroid comes in, and what is the probability that every time an asteroid or comet or nucleus or something comes in and hits the moon or Earth, that it's going to come perfectly perpendicular from above and hit? No, just statistically, very few would actually come perfectly perpendicular. Most of them would come in at an angle. And so examine what's going to happen to the landscape. This thing comes in at an angle, it cuts in, it kind of blows out a hole, and then the material would go ricocheting out the other side, and you'd get this oblong structure. But you look at the moon, all of the craters are round. That would mean that by that concept, the only way that could happen is if all the asteroids or pieces of rock or space rock or whatever came in perfectly perpendicular at that point in the moon. And of course, that's absurd. That's ridiculous. It just ain't going to happen. So let's look at it again from the perspective of an explosion. Say you took a charge, a nuclear charge or something, and you drilled a hole down where if you go too far down, then you're just going to get like a bulge in the earth and it's going to fall back down and create a cavity in the earth or something like that. But let's imagine that you put your charge close enough to the surface where it's really going to blow out the material and leave a crater in the ground. Okay, so now let's look at the cross section of a crater. And you can do this, the Winslow, Arizona crater. You can see drawings. And what happens is always kind of like a mound in the middle. And you look on the moon too. Very few of the craters do not have this mound structure in the middle. So you have a big crater like this, kind of pretty much a circular crater. And then the walls come down. And usually that lip at the edge of the crater is uplifted. So whatever came, it pushed out and up and kind of formed this like mini short barrel cannon, so to speak. And then in the center, there's a mound. But when you go to the mound, you really don't find a lot of material, residue material. But there's usually some metal that's probably liquefied, and when metal is liquefied, especially in dirt, etc., it coagulates. It comes together and it forms a liquid material. It's one of the ways you smelt metal. Okay, so look at an explosion. if you took the charge and put it there, the explosion is going to go out in all directions. And so down is going to meet the most resistance. So that's why there's a mound that's left there. But what happens is it blows and the material comes out and around and up like this. And so really what we're looking at here, every one of those craters was when whatever came in to hit them, there was an explosion, and a big explosion. We're talking nuclear class explosion. We're not just talking about the energy of impact, and that's what people have been talking about incorrectly, that somehow a bolide comes in and vaporizes up in the atmosphere and causes some damage, like at Tunguska. No, I can tell you, I worked with the Russian scientists who were boots on the ground at Tunguska, and there was no residual material of any kind of bolide, and it was an electrical connection, and that's why they liked my work, is because it explained where the electrical connection came from that was that big that it could actually create a nuclear explosion with the water. The water separates into hydrogen and oxygen. The hydrogen is then nuclear fuel for an explosion, and that's what caused the explosion at Tunguska at ground level. The explosion was ground level, ground zero. Okay, so let's get back to the lunar craters and the Earth craters. So when the whatever the object is comes in at some angle, and when it gets down deep enough, the energy is expended sufficient, and there's probably a lot of electrical energy expended at the same time that creates an explosion that blows this material out, and that leaves the mound in the middle, because like I said, when the explosion goes off, the energy tries to go out in all directions, while downward is the most resistance, because the whole Earth, you got to go all the way to China to get through that. And so it blows a kind of a cavity like this on both sides, pushes up the walls of the crater, and pushes back, and that's what you're left with. But here's the point. Most of the energy is expended locally, and most of the material goes shooting straight upwards in the atmosphere. So even though it might be a big crater, like the one off of the Yucatan Peninsula, most of that material went up. And it's not going to affect the entire world. I think the NASA, it's my personal opinion, professional opinion, that the NASA simulations that the entire world would catch on fire and burn to the crisp. No, most of that energy is expended directly outwards through the atmosphere, and that's the end of it. Some of the stuff might fall back into the atmosphere, but it's not going to be this situation where an asteroid hits Earth and burns the entire Earth down. Simply not the way it works. Most of that energy is redirected upwards and outwards. Okay, just a quick notice here. Go to the web pages, support the show, the patreon.com/JMCCSCI. You'll get additional content there, and it's a way of supporting this show as little as $5 a month. Go to the webpage jmccsci.com, that's short for the J. McCanney Science.com webpage, and the water filter page, jmccwaterfilters.com, the best water filters in the world, and use on the water filter page coupon code JMCC for an additional discount, coupon code JMCC. So we'll talk to you next week. Okay, I want to add a quick comment here about the brightening of 3I Atlas as it approaches Jupiter, because and I want to give a historical reference. This is what the ancients talk about. This is interesting because now, in a normal world, in the ancient world, the human race would not know anything about 3I Atlas. All of the information on 3I Atlas is coming because of telescopes, a modern invention that Galileo made the first real one to use for astronomical purposes. That's why we call the four moons of Jupiter, the big ones, we call them the Galilean moons, because they were discovered by Galileo with his little handmade telescope. So telescopes are a relatively modern thing. And so what the ancients tell us, and they didn't make this up, this is not some, the claim of modern astronomers that the ancients made all of this up is absolutely absurd. No, what they saw when Venus the comet, Venus was born of Jupiter. Remember? Venus, and it was Venus the comet. And so what happened is Jupiter captured Venus. And Velikovsky, in his somewhat ignorance of celestial mechanics and understanding, remember that Velikovsky was studying calendars. And what he noticed was all of the ancient civilizations were talking about this Venus comet thing. And the broom star and on and on and on. And so what happened is Velikovsky claimed incorrectly that it came out of Jupiter, somehow exploded out of Jupiter, because that's what the ancients saw. And Velikovsky in 1950 or in the 40s, he had no knowledge of this. And of course, standard astronomy had no clue about anything. They were only reacting, the Fred Whipple ice ball comet model came out as a reaction to the books of Velikovsky. And so anyway, Velikovsky noted, rightfully so, that the ancient civilization saw Venus brightening greatly as it was born of Jupiter. And then it came into the solar system in the ecliptic and was moving around, and it eventually encountered Mars, took the oceans and atmospheres off of Mars, and then had two encounters with Earth on its way moving into the orbit where it is today. And that's caused by the tail drag. We saw Hale-Bopp losing orbital orbital energy due to the tail drag. Hale-Bopp is a planet that's in formation in our solar system right now. It's at an angle, about a 90-degree angle with the ecliptic, but still, and I think that's where 3I Atlas may end up. Let me give you a prediction of what I think is going to happen based on just rudimentary analysis that I've done with 3I Atlas. But first of all, it will have a tremendous brightening, just like Venus did with Jupiter. And will it be captured into our solar system? And here's my initial analysis. It's going to come down under Jupiter and behind it. So as it goes by Jupiter, Jupiter is going to pull on it and I think flip it up into an orbit that's similar to Hale-Bopp, that is perpendicular to the ecliptic, the plane of the planets, the plane of Earth's orbit, actually, to be specific. But most of the planets are within a few degrees of the Earth's ecliptic plane, so that's what we call the plane of the planets. But I think that 3I Atlas is going to have a tremendous brightening, so much so that you might be able to see it with the naked eye. And that's when the disinformation crews are going to come out in full force. Oh, it's just a little snowball, just a little icy wanderer. And that's what this whole PSYOPs is about. By the way, one of the recent AI-created Avi Loeb videos said that they're going to be definitely extending the PSYOP out to June of 2026. So this is not going to end, this constant chatter about 3I Atlas. But I think what they're getting ready for is the inevitable, when this thing is going to brighten extensively and then come out of Jupiter and become visible to the naked eye, at least for a period of time, and in a very altered orbit. And that very altered orbit, I think, is going to throw it back into the solar system. I don't know. It's not clear yet. It's going to lose that much energy. And let me talk about the capture process. This was first extensively discovered and and analyzed by TJJC, and I reference him in my original comet papers. SEE is the last name. And the other guy, author's name was Darwin. He was like Charles Darwin's grandson or son, I forget which. But anyway, this is one of the big books that I was able to find when I was at Cornell in the library stacks. There was a 2-volume set. It was the big initial volume on the effects of what they call the resisting medium. And they went through the mathematical analysis to show how it would circularize orbits and energy damping, which caused the elliptical orbits to turn into circular orbits, and then the orbits to shrink in radius. And that was due to what they call the resisting medium. Well, it was eventually discovered that space was pretty much empty, so there was no resisting medium. But when I came along with the plasma discharge comet model, I realized that the comet was picking up this material, and it was the tail drag that was the equivalent of the resisting medium that TJJC did not know about. So it was opportunistic when I was at Cornell to have access to those books. And it was crucial because nobody had ever understood this before. And so the tail drag is one of the essential aspects of my work, showing how the comets circularize their orbit, and that's what's going on with Hale-Bopp right now, and that's what will happen. It's already happening with 3I Atlas, which indicates, too, that this is typically what's going on with the bigger comets, because the small comets don't have enough gravitational attraction, surface gravity, to hold the material in place that's attracted into the nucleus, so the ions become neutralized with the electron cloud that's around the nucleus, and they go floating out with the solar wind, and they really don't accumulate, other than maybe some burned tar onto the nucleus of the comet, but they don't really accumulate. It's the big comets that have this effect, the tail drag and the change of orbits, which people call non-gravitational effects. And that's why when they see the sunward spike, it's a sunward spike. It's part of the plasma discharge. And when it's attracting material, it's altering its orbit. Those are the non-gravitational forces. And so it's not an alien propulsion system or plasma. No, it is the plasma discharge comet model at work. That's what it does. Comets change orbits, and the ancients talked about the lawless ones. That's what they were very specific about. Okay, so I'm expecting this comet to brighten greatly, and watch the disinformation come out then. That's what they're building up to, because they know this thing is going to, and that's why it had some marked increases when it came by Mars, and all the electrical discharges. It probably had electrical discharges to the moons of Mars. All of this data is being obfuscated by NASA. What a bunch of just a criminal entity. Never a straight answer is not even good enough for them. That's how rotten and low. And this is, the whole idea of science is openness. And this lady comes on when NASA did that ridiculous press release about a month ago, where they were was December something, where they're supposed to release all of the data. She goes, "Oh, we're so open. All of the data is on our webpage. It's available. We welcome input from everybody." Just a complete lie. Complete lie. Okay, so we're going to be in for some interesting times here in 2026, astronomically. Okay, let's see here.
This has been Master of Science with host James McCanney. Join us each week as James will delve into historical figures such as Nikola Tesla, Albert Einstein, and the great mathematicians as we explore the history of man, Earth, and our universe as you've never seen it before. Tuesdays, 7 p.m. Eastern,